everyone, and welcome to Grace Community Church. Some interesting things have happened since last we met. We were supposed to have lost about 180 parking spaces as of today, but the courts would not let the county do that to us. So and because the Lord is gracious, the dear folks down at the synagogue in the middle of the block said you can use our parking lot. We've got 150 more spaces. So instead of less, we have more. For which we say with the psalmist, praise the Lord. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is what? Good.
Hey, Tim Frisch with A Frisch Perspective. That was Pastor John MacArthur at the beginning of the Sunday service on October 4th, where he's talking about how God has actually supplied more parking in spite of the government there trying to come down on the church and actually take away a parking area that they were leasing from the county. There was an article about that at the end of August from the Christian Post. It says, "This is harassment. John MacArthur's church to be evicted from land leased for parking lot." Los Angeles County has notified Grace Community Church, led by Pastor John MacArthur, that it will soon be evicted from a parcel of land it uses as a parking lot. A move lawyers say is retaliation for the church's decision to hold indoor worship services amid the COVID-19 pandemic. In a letter dated August 28th, the County of Los Angeles Department of Public Works informed the Sun Valley-based church that on October 1st, it is being evicted from a large portion of the parking lot of the church that has been in place continuously since 1975. So the county was going to try to take away that parking area, but as John MacArthur said, the courts would not allow that. I love how God does these things when people try to come down on God's people, how the Lord protects them and provides. And not only provides what they needed and what they had before, but actually increases their supply. I'm reminded of the story in the Old Testament where Balak tries to send Balaam to curse Israel. And instead of cursing Israel, he ends up blessing them because he had to say what God was telling him to say. So the county in some way is trying to come down on the church, but God instead is actually blessing them and increasing what they have. And it's so interesting because he's talking there about how they had, I guess, 180 spaces in the county parking area, which was going to be taken away. And then a local synagogue, he said, actually offered them to have 150 more spaces. So they not only have the 180 spaces, but they have now 150 more spaces. So it sounds like a total of 330 spaces instead of 180. It's just wonderful how God works. I love, too, that God used a local synagogue to supply for the church. I just thought that was really cool. And apparently the synagogue is not using their place for worship on Sundays. But it's just great how God does things, uses the Jewish people to bless the Christians here, and actually increases the parking for the church and turns the situation around. And so what a blessing that is. I thought you would enjoy hearing that. I have other stories I'll be reporting this week where things aren't necessarily going as well in other places. But it's just great to see in situations like this that whether things are going well or not at a given time, we know that God is working all things together for a purpose, for good in our lives. And ultimately, he's working out a good plan, and he shows himself strong on behalf of his people. It's also great because Grace Community Church, from what I understand, is going to be able to meet into the next year, and the courts really aren't going to come down on the church for doing that. So God is really protecting their situation, and through them I think it really gives protections, hopefully for other churches as well. So hopefully as time goes on, we will see the legal system actually protecting First Amendment rights. That is very important. Of course, people are bringing up, well, what about the dangers of the COVID-19 situation? And yes, we do want to be safe. We want to take necessary precautions. But I think the big argument here that you're seeing is that we don't want the government to come down and be too strict, overly strict in ways that are not justified by the actual statistics of the disease. And so that's really what this is all coming down to here. Now, I've said this so many times, people have different opinions about how dangerous the situation is. We'll continue to monitor, but I was just looking at a statistic recently that said that 655,000 people die every year in the United States of heart disease. So that gives you an idea. If there have been 200,000 people that have died with COVID-related deaths, 655,000 die every year of heart disease. So that kind of puts it a little bit in perspective. And so again, it's not saying that COVID isn't dangerous or it's not something to take seriously, but we do have to really always look at the big picture. Not only what the disease itself is going to do, but also what do our reactions do? If our response to the disease is an overreaction, that can actually create greater problems and even greater danger. You think about people who can't actually go to church and be with people they love. Physically, they can't be there, and what a danger that can be for them mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So we have to take all that into account. And what MacArthur and other churches are saying is, of course we want to take precautions as necessary, but if there's no real high level of danger, we should be able to meet because it's important for people's well-being. So there's so many things we could talk about here, but I just wanted to share that good news with you and a little bit of my thoughts there. I'd love to hear what you think in the comments below. But as always, thank you so much for listening to what I have to say from A Frisch Perspective.